Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're going to continue along with 1984, going over today Chapter 2, Part 5, pages 150 through 160. So we are getting almost halfway through the book. And just to recap what we went over last time, the burgeoning relationship, I think that's the right word, burgeoning, the developing relationship between Winston and Julia, how often they have met up in chapter 2. We have seen them meet up a ton, have a physical relationship, talk about a lot of different things. Last time they were in the room above Sherrington's shop. We find out that Winston has now rented out that room. We talked about how I think Winston is happier to use the room as a place to escape, to meditate, to be with himself, the quote unquote oneself that the party tries to dispel you from having, tries to keep you from having in Oceania. And in part 5, we're just going to continue along with this relationship between Winston and Julia. And we're going to go over one of the biggest differences between the two. They both like being together. They both enjoy going against the party, but there is a difference between how Winston and Julia views the party. We kind of talked about this last time, too. Just starting off, we'll get right into it here. Right at the beginning of Part 5, Chapter 2, Part 5, we see that Syme has vanished. So Winston's prediction on Syme has come true. If you guys remember from Chapter 1, Winston had predicted that Syme would most certainly be killed off because he was too smart for his own good and he didn't really know when to shut up. He knew way too much. He was kind of like a know-it-all. And yes, he liked the party and stuff, and he was working on the new dictionary, but he was always kind of asking questions. The best way to describe it was really didn't know when to shut up. So on the one hand, he's espousing all these party principles. He's working on the Newspeak dictionary. He would turn Winston in a heartbeat to the thought police. And yet he's killed off because the fact that he can't shut up, know when to stop talking, and he knows so much information about the party, about Newspeak, that now all of a sudden the tables kind of turn on you in that point, to where if you become compromised by by a revolutionary group, by Goldstein and the Brotherhood, well, now you have a lot of information. They have a lot of information at their disposals if they can turn you over to their side. It's much like you see in the NFL playoffs. Shout outs Super Bowl next week. In the NFL playoffs, when somebody is released, a playoff team will pick them up right away because they know information on how that team operates. This is what people were talking about. I remember this happened with Joik Bell back when the Lions played the Saints in like 2010, I think it was 2010. Lions dropped them. Saints picked them up. The Saints played the Lions in the playoffs that year. Gee, I wonder why they picked them up. So kind of same reason I think why Syme gets killed off here. And the funny thing is, I guess it's not funny, but Syme just ends up getting erased completely from history. He's never existed. His name is taken off the chess committee. Nobody's really mentioning him anymore. And everything Winston talked about or Winston works on at work in the records department is done to Syme. People have rectified Syme's name out of everything. So it's just kind of scary how fast that happens. right? And that's all we hear about Syme. Right after Orwell writes this little blurb about Syme right at the beginning, now we just hop right into normal chapter 5 stuff. All right, there's a hate week that's coming up. I still don't really know what hate week is. We've seen the 2 minutes of hate, back in chapter 1, where everybody's yelling at Goldstein, and then Big Brother's face comes in there and everybody's in this deep trance of like thankfulness. Oh my God, Big Brother saving us from Goldstein, from the Eurasian soldier, or I think it was Eurasian, East Asian. I don't know, it changes so much, right? But now we have a hate week coming up. This is mentioned multiple times throughout the book. If you guys remember, the chocolate rations are being reduced, I believe, for hate week. The electricity, he can't take the elevator up to his room at the Victory Mansion. It's because of hate weeks. Things are getting diverted. And a bunch of other stuff is happening. So they're working overtime. Him and Julia working overtime. I don't even think they're really seeing each other much. At this point in part 5, they've just been working a ton. Julia's trying to get atrocity pamphlets out. Winston is going through back files of the Times, altering news items. Rocket bombs are going off at a much faster rate. There's the hate song being played all over town. The Parsons are doing their things. They're hanging up flags, poster streamers around the block. And then the proles are being whipped up into a frenzy. Normally, the proles are just very apolitical. We learned about this back when Winston went and visited the place in town in Oceania where the proles lived. Proles, they're very apolitical, but their politics are only cared about when it really matters, like for Hate Week, I guess. They're being whipped up into a frenzy about war, about, hey, oh my God, there's imminent attack, we're getting bombed, to possibly sway them and to get them on the side of Big Brother and thinking that, oh, we need Big Brother to come and save us from this impending war because it might destroy our way of life. So the propaganda is beginning to be pumped in. I found this little tidbit here interesting, that a new poster is being circulated around, and it actually ends up being more outnumbers the posters of Big Brother. I was going to say more populous, but no. This new poster is outnumbering the posters of Big Brother. Holy shit. Like, why would that happen, you think? Well, this new poster is of a monstrous Eurasian soldier, expressionless Eurasian face. It's got enormous boots, and then a gun that was pointed right at you. And it's described in here, magnified by the foreshortening, seemed to be pointed straight at you. From whatever angle you looked at the poster, the muzzle of the gun seemed to be pointed straight at you. So obviously, what do you think this new poster is kind of trying to convey here? Bombs are going off. The proles are being tossed into a frenzy. They're gearing up for a war, like a huge war. And they're already in war. It's almost like they're never not in war, but they're getting you to think about the war so that it's pervasive in your mind, so that you start to realize these Eurasian soldiers are ruining our way of life. So, yes, we support the war. It's all for support of the war, in my opinion. Make this poster as scary as possible, the enemy as scary as possible, so that you have no issues with Oceania going into Eurasia and fighting this fight. They're doing it for your safety. So I thought that was an interesting tidbit there. We go back to the room next. And again, this room is above Sherrington's shop. Winston ends up subletting it out. And he's got his own little personal hideaway. Winston loves this place. No matter how bad it smells, how bad it looks, and it does look pretty bad. There's bugs all around the place. Junk. It's a junk shop. It's probably not a very nice place. Sherrington barely sells anything out of there. Nothing's really of value. The room stinks, like I said. Bugs, rats. There was even a rat, the chapter 2, part 4. But Winston doesn't care because to him, this is paradise. It's his escape. And newly now, it's Winston and Julia's escape. Because Winston and Julia have been meeting up here a lot. They've met a lot in this month of June, which is where currently this part 5 takes place. And now Winston's starting to go through some changes. Some changes ever since he started essentially dating Julia. This is kind of interesting. He stops drinking gin. His varicose ulcer has subsided from bothering him. He's grown fatter. His coughing fits have stopped. So why do you think that is? It's almost like possibly the food that Julia has access to, because remember last time, Julia brought in like real like inner party food, like real coffee, real milk, jelly, like food with actual probably nutritional value. And Winston mentions how there's a taste difference between the regular chocolate, and then remember she brings him chocolate back when they're in the countryside in London. And he says, like, I haven't had chocolate like this in a long time. So it could be, okay, his nutritional value is getting better, so ulcers healing up, coughing fits have stopped, he's not as sick, but he's also growing fatter, so maybe he's just letting himself go, right? The stuff from the party, you know, it's not meant to keep you full, probably. That's the worst thing the party wants to do, is to keep you satisfied. They want to keep you coming back to that cafeteria, to the canteen in the Ministry of Truth. Keep you eating, keep you on the Ferris wheel, keep you always dependent on that canteen. Winston's also stopped drinking gin because he just doesn't need to anymore. Now he's got a girlfriend. He doesn't need to pass the time by drinking all the time. He just spends his time with Julia. So it's overall, like, it seems like Julia has been kind of a positive on his life. And I'm basing that off of all these 4 bullet points are because of dating Julia and hanging out in this room with her. They don't have to run around the countryside now. They have somewhere that's much closer by. And what mattered the most was that the room existed, that they were able to be there. It's a sanctuary, and it represented safety and permanence, somewhere where Winston can again go and decompress. There's no telescreen around. He can think whatever he want to think, what he wants to think. He can talk about whatever he wants to talk about, and he's at peace, building that oneself again. Well, he ends up not introducing, but Sherrington enters the picture a little bit. And it's interesting here, we find out a little more on Sherrington. Sherrington never goes outdoors. He's got a bunch of worthless junk around. He knows a bunch of these poems and random rhymes from back in the day. And he's got this ancient gramophone, which at first when I was reading this little detail here, I don't get why Orwell would kind of just sneak this in there about this gramophone. He specifically says, and I'm trying to find the spot where he introduces the gramophone. Sherrington, a few minutes, worthless stock, bowed shoulders. Should admire dead baby's hair, never asked Winston should buy it. There was 20 blackbirds. He had a gramophone, though. Where was this? And I didn't underline it, of course. And I thought it's somewhere in here that he mentions that, there's just this gramophone at Sherrington shop. And I almost kind of paused and was scared for Winston for a second there because I thought the gramophone, I thought of like the speak right or like a telescreen, but for proles. So that kind of like made me a little nervous. But again, we don't know too much about Sherrington, his motives, why he's got all this junk, doesn't seem to really want to sell it. Nothing's really ever talked about the other customers that come into Sherrington's shop. There probably isn't even any. Sherrington is just, like Winston says, an extinct animal, really a representation of pre-revolutionary times. You just don't see people like that who talk like that anymore, too. Because you got to remember, all these proles are not using Newspeak. They're using Old Speak. Anyway, we continue on. Winston and Julia start to talk about their future a little bit. And they talk about getting married. And it's interesting. They basically talk about starting brand new lives. Like, hey, why don't we become proles, denounce our names, move in to Prolandia full time. We'll change our appearance and we'll just start working in one of the factories. It's like nobody will know. Or, to hell with it, we're going to be found out anyway. Let's just both commit suicide together. And here's where we get into the difference between Winston and Julia. And again, we talked about this last time too, and this was one of the questions on the blog post. They both don't like the party. But again, where Winston is all about rebellion, buying the diary, denouncing Big Brother, wanting to talk to O'Brien, to find out if the Brotherhood exists, if Goldstein exists, if the book exists. Julia's not interested in all that, and she doesn't even believe in the rebellion. She believes it's really just a moot point. Party's invincible. There's no escape from it. I'm just going to keep hiding, bouncing around, doing my mischievous little acts, and I could care less about the party. Obviously, to hell with them, but I'm not going to be the person that changes Oceania for the better. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And it's interesting here, she mentions that the party is the one that's dropping the bombs. Winston almost like kind of can't believe it. Like, wait, are you serious? The party's the one dropping the bombs? Well, think about it. Think about back to that Eurasian poster. They're trying to push for the war. The poster is one way to do that, but another way, drop bombs on yourself and say that it's Eurasia. Yeah, Eurasia's dropping bombs today. Meanwhile, you're the one that's popping them off. And there's more and more of these bombs, as we've mentioned, bombs and rockets, whatever, that have been dropping to get the people amped up for a war. Hey, we need to defend ourselves against these Eurasian soldiers, against this Eurasian country. Next, again, Winston, he knows about the propaganda. He's mentioned before how he had evidence that the party doctored something, rewrote the past. Because normally stuff like that gets thrown down the memory hole. But no, he had evidence with Rutherford, Aronson, and Jones. Remember that? He knows just a little bit about pre-revolutionary times. I mean, he was very, very young. So he has more of a perspective, whereas Julia can't really see behind the propaganda of everything. Truth and falsehood are not important to her. Case in point, she believes that the party had invented airplanes. She takes it at face value, and Winston tries to tell her, when I was in school, the party had just invented helicopters. There was not even mention of airplanes. But now, you know, Julia's several years younger than him. Now, when you're in school, they're saying not only have we invented helicopters, but we've invented airplanes. At least that's how I interpreted this. I don't think they swapped helicopters for airplanes, although they might have. So Winston's trying to share this to her, but she's uninterested. She doesn't really care. And then she mentions how she believes that Oceania was always at war with Eurasia. When he has to kind of tell her that 4 years ago, Oceania had been at war with East Asia and peace with Eurasia. And she's like, oh, yeah, wait, I thought we were always at war with Eurasia. But remember, the party switches up who it's going to war with like a ton. And this kind of scares Winston. He's like, oh my God, how do you not know this, but I know this? She actually mentions, like, who cares about this? Who cares? All I care about is this relationship, and that's what she mentions. Like, that's what we should really be talking about. We shouldn't really be worried about all this other stuff. And again, the story, he tries telling her the story of Aronson, Jones, and Rutherford, and she just doesn't really understand it. She's like, oh, are these your friends? And he's like, no. And she says, well, why do you care then? But he cares because history has essentially stopped. The past is continually falsified, and there's just an endless present. You see it when Julia says that, hey, we've always been at war with Eurasia. Is that what I mentioned? Eurasia? I just want to make sure it's not East Asia. Yeah, Eurasia. Yeah. So there's an endless present. Everything's being just doctored constantly. And we know nothing about pre-revolutionary times. The Big Brother has just inserted himself into the past. And ultimately, here's the difference. Winston wants to plant the seeds of resistance. He wants to break free from the party, and Julia just wants to focus on their relationship, having fun, and doing her little mischievous little things, going out to the countryside, sneaking food from the inner party, having sex whenever she wants to. She doesn't really care about the resistance, but Winston does. She says, I'm quite ready to take risks, but only for something worthwhile, not for bits of old newspaper. But Winston says, this is evidence. I'm not interested in the next. Oh, no, that's what. Yeah. But it was evidence. I don't imagine that we can alter anything in our lifetime, but one can imagine little knots of resistance springing up here and there, small groups of people banding themselves together and gradually growing. And Winston says, hey, I could be that spark. Julia doesn't want to be the spark. And he goes on to mention Julia presents an orthodoxy without knowing what the orthodoxy means. Essentially, she's able to just swallow everything, take everything that the party says at face value, just as long as it's not doing any harm to her. As long as she can keep running around doing her thing, she doesn't care. And he mentions there's this corn analogy he mentions. It's like when a corn gets passed through undigested through the body of the bird, that's how information is passing through Julia. And that's actually going to be one of our discussion questions. This is actually the end of Chapter 2, Part 5. Here's the discussion questions. Speaking of the devil. Take a look at them. They will be in the description. I'll try to get them pinned in the comments section too. They'll be on the Chee-Tash blog. Again, that's Chee-Tash.ghost.io. That'll be link to the blog will be in the description as well. And let me know your thoughts on these discussion questions. And again, you can go to the blog, see my responses. We'll do Chapter 2, Part 6 next time. And guys, thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. I really, really appreciate it, guys. Subscribers just keep going up. Last time I checked, 142 on YouTube. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening. And let me know how I'm doing, too. If you guys want to see something different, you have a comment on my style. I'm trying to do the best I can, but yeah, constructive criticism wouldn't hurt. Thank you guys so much. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.